Okay, so
Oh.
we can record.
Oh, now we're recorded, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we can at least record.
I look very cold. I'm sorry, y'all.
That's okay. I'm
Yeah,
pressing
Mom
go
likes to
live,
keep
but
everything in.
we are live.
All right. So welcome everyone to our ADHD panel. We are so excited to have Donna Addkison for to talk to us about ADHD. I love her perspective. So Nolan Jensen is my 19-year-old son, and Donna has been his ADHD coach for a long time, ever since he was a senior in high school. And so we are super thankful. I just love her perspective and the way that she's been able to help us to understand the good things about the ADHD brain and kind of demystify it without making it people feel like there's something wrong with having ADHD. I love the way that she's able to see like all the benefits and it's just a different perspective. I love that. And Nolan is here to help to give his perspective as someone who it says I can hear you, but we are frozen in Facebook.
Let's
Okay.
continue because we're recording.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
We'll just put it in later. Okay. Anyway, and so Nolan is here to bring clarity. So if you have any questions, please jump into the Zoom room. The link is in the chat, and so jump in and ask your questions either to Donna or to Nolan. And we would love to help bring some clarity about like what has worked for him. He's now in college, and what kind of systems he's had that have helped to set him up for success and things like that. So a little bit about his journey. All right, so Donna, to start with, so Donna, just a little background on Donna. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, with honors and master degree in political science and criminal justice. She's done master gardening, taught yoga. She's lived in 10 different states, almost in every region, and now lives in Minnesota. She's taught piano lessons and yoga and tutored in a range of subjects. And has directed church choirs and has done volunteer work with civic organizations, animal rescues, and literacy programs. She's worked in higher education as an adjunct instructor. She's run political campaigns and public awareness efforts, served as deputy chief of staff to a governor and chief development officer for a major U.S. city. She's led nonprofit organizations for economic development, and she's she's worked to build community development, credit unions, and community outreach programs, and even helped with the efforts to rebuild the Gulf Coast after the hurricane season of 2005. So with all of these things, like there's such a variety of experiences, right? What is it that made you land on becoming an ADHD coach? And just tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are right now.
You know, Shari, it's interesting as I sit here listening to you detail some of that, I just shake my head. If that isn't textbook ADHD, I don't know what is. I never knew it. I always assumed that everybody wanted to do all sorts of different kinds of things, and that everything was interesting to everyone, and that there was nothing unusual in my ability to weave in and out of different professions and weave in and out of various crisis situations and manage to keep all of these balls in the air. Because the one thing that's not on your list is that I was a mom all at the same time as I was doing all of those things. But they kept me from being bored. What I was doing along the way, though, was coping. There were all sorts of coping mechanisms that I used as a child, as a teenager, in college, in the professional world. I never knew that that's what they were. I operated under the assumption that that's how everybody was. And when I couldn't remember things off the top of my head like other people could, or repeat things that I had just said when very important people would ask me to repeat them, I took it as a personal failing. There was something wrong with me. Over time, those coping mechanisms that worked so well began to fall to the side. And there came a point in time in my life where, having recognized that my son likely also had ADHD, I began to understand that this does follow family trees, and wonder where he got it. And oh, by the way, why were these things not working for me anymore? So I eventually asked to be assessed after folks along the way, medical professionals and others, saying, oh, it's just anxiety. Oh, it's just depression. Oh, it's just age. Oh, you're just trying to do too much. Do you hear all the justs in there? And was eventually diagnosed with relatively all-encompassing ADHD, much more on the attentive side than the hyperactive, but I assure you there are elements of hyperactivity involved in my ADHD as well. What led me to become an ADHD coach was a certain level of frustration with the inability to find information that I felt like I could trust, information that seemed relevant to my experience, to my son's experience, with all of the conflicting views and all of the conflicting tips. You know, it tickles me to even use the example of just turn everything off so it won't be distracting. You can focus, or turn on music so there's noise in the background so you can focus. Well, how can it be both? And how do you know which one? So after working with some students in 2020 who were in and of themselves neurodivergent in a number of ways, I realized I had more in common with them. And I realized that I wanted to know more about how to support them and how to support adults who were diagnosed late, how to support households, because ADHD in the house affects everyone living in that house, how to support those in a workspace who also engage with ADHD brains. How do we create awareness? And that's when I learned that there are very young professional certification and educational programs out there teaching folks like me how to work with individuals and with units of people, whatever that looks like, to best understand what ADHD is and what it is not, and how we can both support and encourage those individuals in our lives who live with ADHD 24/7, 365.
Awesome. Okay. So tell us about ADHD. Like, what is ADHD? I mean, I know that everybody has their own kind of, definition of what ADHD is, but can you tell us about, like, what is it? What are the defining things about ADHD from your perspective compared to the neurotypical brain?
I thank you for prefacing it that way. I am not a medical professional. I don't play one on television. I do love science, so I read the science to try to understand what's really happening and move around the mythology of ADHD. what I have learned is that if we go back into the 1700s, we find early quote unquote medical doctors actually recording the symptoms associated with ADHD, and in many respects calling it a disorder of attention. We know now that it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. Our brains grow and develop differently from a neurotypical brain. We also now know that this disorder affects the activity within the brain, and in some ways impacts those things that we have come to call executive functions, with somewhat of a misleading name there. Think of those things that we like to associate with the front of the brain, as opposed to the more ancient reptilian brain in the back. Those things that we rely on as human beings to move through our world. We develop those more slowly, and in some cases, they don't develop as fully as a neurotypical brain does. And yet, because of the very unique wiring of this particular type of brain, we find that these brains function very well in environments that are more welcoming, and where those brains can be more responsive. For example, we find that ADHD brains do really well in managing crisis in a way that our neurotypical friends and family members cannot. We like to do things that that matter. The ADHD brain tends to be much more other focused, much more community focused, much more justice and fairness focused. Don't know that we understand why, but the research supports it. And we also are now coming to a place where we understand that the impact ADHD has on the brain also in some way affects how we experience emotions. And that can mean that we experience those emotions more intensely. We may be more prone to emotional dysregulation or responding to events and things with emotions that seem somewhat out of proportion. All of those things, though, are symptoms that we can manage if we are afforded the opportunity to, through medication, through treatment, through coaching, through whatever combination of those things is most appropriate and in line with how a household is willing to invest their time, their energy, and their support.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, so a lot of people think, or I've heard people say that ADHD, or they think that ADHD is just an excuse to be lazy or get out of things that you don't want to do. So what would you say to people who think this?
I would say that those of us who live with ADHD wired brains can only wish that it were so. There are many, many days, I'm sure, when we would love for it to be an excuse. The reality is that it's not. It's a very real thing that we live with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 and a quarter days every year. COVID has created an interesting opportunity for folks to experience in small form a little bit of what the ADHD brain experiences on the whole. You know, we hear people talking about, well, everybody gets distracted and we're all a little forgetful. And, you know, we're all feeling a little overwhelmed now that we're getting back out into the world, and crowds seem to feel different and sounds are different. And my response to them is, now, imagine if that were your experience every minute of every hour of every day of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very different response then. It is not something that we can fix. It is not something that we can turn off. It is absolutely something that we can manage. It's absolutely something that contributes a flavor to being human that has value. Our intention must be to understand that it is a different experience. And much like we say, well, walk a mile in my shoes, this is one of those instances where that would be very hard to do. So if we can understand that it is truly rooted in physiological differences in how our brains are actually built, then we can move to a place where the conversation is much more fact-based and give us a place to launch, as it relates to coaching, most particularly working from where an individual's strengths lie, as opposed to trying to quote unquote fix those things that we consider to be failings or problems.
Awesome. So that's a perfect segue then into like, what do you do then? How do you coach people? Like, how do you do?
In my practice, I work with individuals, with couples, with households, whatever that looks like. And in whatever form that the individual with ADHD or the individual who's living with ADHD or working with someone who has it wants to approach it. We start by understanding a little bit about what ADHD is, if there's some learning to be done there. We also start by ensuring that the individual undergoing coaching wants to be coached. We know that the ADHD brain is not fired, is not responsive to what is important as a neurotypical brain would be. It is fired by what is interesting. So we want to make sure that folks are coming to coaching because it's interesting, not because someone has told them that this falls into those lists of words that we avoid, like should. So I have an assessment that I use that lets us look at who a person really is in their core. And we build from those strengths, thinking about who a person wants to be across the span of their lives at whatever phase they're in. We know that if we can ground the work in who someone is and who they want to be, then the what they want to do and how to do it can be much more sustainable, can be much more productive, if you want to use that word, and can create a variety of ingredients that person can then use later on in different situations to achieve what it is they want to achieve in order to be who it is that they want to become. We typically do this over a number of sessions. If it's a one-on-one situation, we work in groups of 12, again, whether it's a household or a couple or parents and kids or individuals, to create bookends, if you will. With ADHD brains, it's hard to mark time sometimes. So if we are counting down from 12, then we can see time passing if we can't feel it. And we inspire a sense of urgency and curiosity that's absent when something is left open-ended. So we work in groups of 12. And
12 sessions, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And we work on real world things, real world situations, real time experiences, real time goals and objectives. Whether this is work related or school related, we'll think about how we break that down, building on those strengths and incorporating skills and tools that can make a difference in doing the thing that needs to be done by creating interest around it, is the easiest way to say it.
Okay. Awesome. Let's see. Was I going to say? Oh, can you tell us your whole, like, actually, I'm going to start with Nolan first, and then we'll come back to, I want you guys
I will interject, Shari. I do have a client on the hour, and so I do have to pop off. If you would like to record more of this later, we certainly can pick up where we left off and maybe do it in a couple of segments. I'm happy to help you get this information out. Okay.
So you were talking before about, you and Nolan had this conversation about how the whole thing about you're the ADHD is the reason why a lot of people how did you explain that whole the migration of the species?
The migration. This is Donna's theory and how I explain the difference in the brain sometimes to groups of folks. If you can imagine going way, way back in time, we're all sitting around the campfire, staying warm, talking about our day. The ADHD brains may well have been the ones that looked out and saw the mountains or saw the expanse and said, I wonder what's over there. I wonder if we throw this piece of wood on water, it'll float. I wonder if we climb on top of the water, on top of the wood, on top of the water, we would float too. And as you advance through time and space, we can really begin to see where it is the ADHD wired brains that were creating those new connections, that novel approach to things, and may well have been part of how we migrated around the globe, how we have come to the place of advancement that we are in now. So if you want a creative solution, it's the ADHD brain in the house or at work that you will go to find that creative solution to really complex problems. I tease that the ADHD brains were so busy doing this that we ceded control of the day-to-day operations of the planet to the neurotypical brains. And that's how we find ourselves in this space where we now, as ADHD wired brains, live in a neurotypical world, or a world that is arranged around the expectations of neurotypical brains. So when we learn to live together, when we learn to recognize that there is value in this diversity of brains and how we approach the world, there's an awful lot of value and an awful lot of good in that. It allows us to move away from the justs and shoulds and fix-it mentalities into a space that allows us to befriend our own brains, and to begin to look at how we can maximize what makes the brain unique and minimize the negative consequences that ADHD can and does produce across a lifetime.
Awesome.
So I will thank you, and I apologize for having to pop off. Like I said, if I can do anything else, you have my number, you have my email. I'm happy to do what I can.
Okay, thank you so much. And we'll put your information out there in case people are interested in hooking up with you for coaching too.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Thank you so much, Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
All right. So now we have Nolan. And so Nolan, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your journey with an ADHD brain?
Sure. Hold on. Well, I guess where do I start? Like I guess I think I was diagnosed with ADHD in fourth grade, third or fourth grade. And I've been on a series of different medications and stuff like that, and pretty much been struggling with that. I didn't get. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right then.
Do you have Siri on?
Yes. There. All right. What was I saying?
You were talking about how you were taking different kinds of medications and
Oh yeah, I've just had to take, like, we've gone from medication to medication and kind of person to person trying to figure out the best thing that works and the best solutions and everything. So what I've found personally for me has been the biggest help is like doing something that uses a lot of mental energy, or that can trying to find, because for me it's whatever I focus on is going to be the thing that's going to be more it's going to be the thing that's a little bit more like interesting or stimulating for my brain. That's typically what most ADHD people focus on. And so it can typically just be really difficult to focus on the less interesting things. Like for me, like computer stuff is typically really, really interesting. So I can stay focused on that for a really long time. But math stuff I find really boring, really annoying to do. So I end up having to find other ways to make it stimulating so I don't get distracted as easily. So for me, it's like listening to, especially for math, listening to like fast paced, like heavy instrumental music, like like heavy like heavy rock or heavy metal, or even sometimes heavier like rap and stuff like that. But typically something that uses a lot of instrumental side of things, and where it's not a huge focus on, where the music is not a huge focus on the lyrics. Because if it's too much of a focus on the lyrics, then I just end up focusing on the lyrics of the song and don't end up getting anything done anyway. Which is why typically, oftentimes stuff like Eminem, because of kind of how quickly he does some of his lyrics, oftentimes that's really helpful. Stuff like that. And then, or like the soundtrack from the Doom, like video games, because it's just really, really heavy, really fast paced music. And then if I'm working on certain other things, if I'm working on anything that requires reading, like history or like English or something like that, then typically what helps me is like listening to some of this, like soundtracks, like X-Men movie soundtracks or like the Dark Knight trilogy. I listen to a lot of those pretty often. I have a huge playlist of probably, I think, like 30 hours of different soundtracks. But yeah,
So you're saying though, those soundtracks don't typically have words, that they're usually just instrumental, and that
typically.
so that it provides you the distract, or it provides the extra noise so you don't focus on. Tell us a little bit more about why music, why do you, how is music helpful?
Well, for me, my brain's going to get distracted by something anyway. It always does. And so, and typically what causes the distraction and initiates it is hearing a sound. Like if I'm focusing on homework, like at the library or at school on campus or whatever, and somebody over there is talking about something that's interesting to me, like let's say they're discussing the latest episode of Rick and Morty or like Star Wars or something like that, then typically hearing that, my brain just goes into a spiral and I start thinking about just everything else, or looking up YouTube or whatever else, just getting completely sidetracked. So the music can kind of, one of the biggest things is it just drowns out everything else around me. So I'm not able to really hear what else is going on. Or like when I'm at home and I hear like you and dad talking, or you and Mason talking or whatever, or dad is watching a movie or something like that. And it just makes it really hard to concentrate on what I'm trying to concentrate on, because it's just sounds from every direction just constantly being heard. But another thing is that it can really, it's more of a thing that my brain typically will focus, or can only focus on sort of one and a half things at a time. So if I have that music, it'll kind of stimulate my brain and prevent it from getting distracted, because my ears are still paying attention to the music while my eyes and everything else is still able to focus on what I'm doing.
Hmm.
That's really cool. I love hearing about this and how, this could, be an avenue for other kids, other
Mhm.
people with ADHD.
Hmm.
And you like to usually have something in your hand that you're messing with too when you're trying to listen. I know your brothers too, like making something out of paper clips or taking your pens apart, mechanical
Yeah.
pencils apart, or things like that. But having something in your hands has always been helpful for you too, right?
Yeah, like right now, as I'm talking, this entire call that we've had, I've just been playing around with magnets the whole time. But yeah, typically something to fidget with. Another thing is that a lot of, I don't know if Donna had said this already, but a lot of teachers and professors will think that you're not paying attention because you're looking down, you're fidgeting with something, you're taking stuff apart, whatever. And most of the time, I am paying attention despite appearing to not be, because typically, in order to pay attention, I have to be doing something else as well, something that keeps my brain stimulated, because otherwise, I will stare off into space and start thinking about something completely different. And that's why testing environments are always really difficult for me. And like, especially stuff like the ACT, where you can't take anything in there, there's nothing to fidget with while you're taking the test. And so there's nothing to kind of, I get lost in my own mind really easily with testing.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Good. That's really helpful. So how would you say that, well, actually, yeah, how would you say that your brain is different than that of your like peers, other people? What's different about you or the way that your brain works?
Well, um, I think a really big thing and a really important thing is the fact that it's like, I think a really big and important thing is the fact that it's more of my brain just kind of like, it's more of the fact that I can, like, the fact that it's not that even though ADHD is attention deficit disorder or hyperactivity disorder, I never have a deficit of attention. It's that I'm always focused on everything all at the same time, which is why I tend to get sidetracked on something else, is because I'm paying attention to everything all at once. And then I end up losing, or I end up focusing that attention on the things that end up not being as important. But like for me, one of the biggest things is like hyperfocus is a sort of a thing where it's like a blessing and a curse, because it's essentially like your brain gets so focused on one thing that you can get that done really, really well and really, really quickly, but that's only if you're really, really focused on it. And the issue is on the kind of on the downside of it is the fact that oftentimes for me with hyperfocus, it's like if I'm actually really, really honed in on something, for two reasons, I can't do anything else while I'm doing it. Like I forget to eat, forget to go to the bathroom sometimes, like anything else, because for me, having that level of focus and concentration is something that's so rare that that the only time that I do have that focus, I just try and do everything I can to hold on to it as long as I can. So then I refuse to get up to go to the bathroom, because as soon as I get up to go to the bathroom, all of that concentration and focus is gone. Same with getting up to go eat, anything like that. So I just kind of don't get up to do anything. I'm just stuck at the spot, focusing on whatever I'm focusing on. But the thing is the other reason it's kind of a blessing and a curse is because if it's something like stimulating or really interesting, then I can focus on it really, really easily and really well. Something for me like computer science. I have no issue with getting distracted from computer science homework because it's interesting to me. But for other things that aren't interesting, then my brain will shift focus to whatever is the most interesting or stimulating to it. Whether it is somebody else having a conversation about Star Wars, or whether it's a notification that I got on my phone about something or whatever else, I'll just tend to get really, really sidetracked because I'm bored and I don't want to focus on what I have to focus on.
So what would you say that has given you, what are your strengths in that you can associate with having an ADHD brain?
Well, one of the big things is, like I said, hyper focus is the fact that when I am focused, I can get essentially an entire thing that was supposed to be given, or like I can get an entire assignment, which probably is not the best thing to brag about, but the fact that like I can get an entire massive assignment due, like that was assigned over a 3-week period, and get it done in a period of a few hours because of focusing in. And one of the biggest pieces of stimulus for that, and to one of the easiest ways, which unfortunately is also the most stressful way to get that brain stimulation from it, is that's why like typically ADHD people are like procrastinate a ton, is because they can't focus on it until they have to, like until a few hours before it's due, because then they can hyper focus on that, because now there's something that makes it interesting, and that it's a race against the clock. It's I need to get this done in this amount of time before it's due. Like if I have something due the next day, typically I end up staying up really late working on it, because for me it ends up being a race against, honestly, a race against my brain shutting down. Like I'm trying to get it done as quickly as I can and as thoroughly as I can, because I know first off I won't have the energy to do it in the morning, and secondly I need to do it before I fall asleep working on it.
Mhm.
Or like if it's something due at midnight, oftentimes I mean, as much as I try not to, oftentimes I end up not starting it until like a couple hours beforehand, because then it becomes a race against the clock to try and get it done before it's due.
And that's where your focus is most intense, right?
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
when I can get it really done and really well done. It just puts me under a lot of stress.
It makes you tired the next day.
Yeah, because typically I end up staying like this. I had an assignment, a project due for my psychology class that was also about ADHD. And it was that like I ended up staying up till 4 a.m. the night before working on it at my workplace in the office, because I needed to be able to use the printer, because I didn't want to come home and use our printer, because our printer is awful. Well, it's not awful. Our printer is fine, but it's slow. And I had to print off 92 sheets of paper for this project, because she needed a handout for every student in the class, and there were 40 people.
I was just thinking, tell us about like, so Nolan works at a trampoline park, and it's been such a great experience for him. Can you tell us a little bit about why it is that a place like that to work at is such a great place for somebody who has ADHD, so that people can kind of know like what kind of things people are drawn to?
Well, that's the thing is, like there are a ton of other people, at least 4 that I can think of off at the top of my head that work there that have like ADHD or something similar or that just get distracted easily. And the reason I feel like it attracts those kind of people and the reason that I think it's good for people like that is because of the fact that there's always something going on there. Whether it's first off, you're always seeing new people every day. It's very honestly, there's because of where we are and how big of an area or how like important of an area that is, or like how well known, because of how well known it is, there's a lot of people who go there all the time. And like, yeah, we get we get a ton of people, so there's constantly new people coming there, so that's in itself a spark of kind of interest. Like it's interesting or stimulating because it's not the same people all the time. And then another thing too is um there's also just always something going on, whether it's kids not paying attention or doing or um like when I was just regular before I became or like before I became kind of a part of the leadership team, I was when I was just a regular person on the floor, like making sure kids aren't getting hurt. It was always making sure, or it was always, there was something always going on, whether it was a kid not following the rules and me having to tell him to follow the rules or something like that, or an injury is always really kind of very stimulating for the brain because it's an outlier. Typically the things that are really stimulating are outliers from the normal occasion. People with ADHD, or at least from my experience, they don't like the same routine. Because if you have the same routine, you get bored of it really fast. And then you just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the big things. And then also it's a fast-paced place and you're always moving around. And typically for me, the biggest way, or like I need to move around for my brain to be kind of going at it.
Engaged.
Yeah. Which is why a lot of people, like myself included, a lot of people with ADHD fidget with everything, whether it's taking pens apart in class. It's that our brain doesn't work if we're not moving around. So if it's me just spinning in my chair or playing around with magnets while I'm working on, or while I'm on this call thing right now.
Mhm. Yeah. Now tell me real quick, or tell people about exercise. Have you found exercise to make a difference for you?
Yes, but I don't ever have time for exercise.
Right, but tell us about like in what ways, how does exercise help you?
I don't know. It just helps. Um, typically exercise just kind of it gets my blood pumping and it kind of gets my brain a little bit more on track, sort of. But I don't really know any other explanation as to how it works. I just know it helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Creativity. Do you think that having ADHD helps with creativity, or how do you?
Yes, because like Donna was saying, people with ADHD get bored really easily. So typically it ends up being the people, or like it can oftentimes end up being the people who have ADHD that are the ones that kind of lead the innovation because they get bored of what they're doing and they decide they want to change things.
I've also noticed with you and your brother, that you guys are always in every situation, you're always thinking of a new solution to every single problem. It seems to
Yeah.
be like that your brain is always going, okay, there has to be a better way to do things.
Yeah, because oftentimes what may be efficient for other people doesn't feel efficient for me. So I ended up wanting to change things to see if I can make it work better.
Mhm. All right. I think we've already talked about the things that have set you up for success, or is there anything that you wanted to add to, like, what has helped you to be successful, or any advice that you have for parents on setting up environments for success for their little ones?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I can say is be patient. Like, don't be overly patient, but be patient, because from my experience, nothing good ever came out from me trying to focus and then somebody telling me something along the lines of, why aren't you focused? Because that's a redundant question. And that's always been an irritation and a pet peeve of mine, is when somebody asks me why I'm not focused, because there's no answer for that. It's just, I'm not focused because it's boring or whatever else. I just can't focus on it, and I can't. And yeah, and so being my biggest piece of advice for parents is to just kind of be patient about it. Don't get super short tempered with the kid, even as much as you may want to, because now I'm at the point where I work with a lot of people who have stuff like that, because I'm on the leadership team, I'm in management there now. And so I do have to work with those people, and it can be really, really, really difficult to stay patient with them. But if you start to go off on them too easily, or if you're just not patient enough with them, they're just going to get irritated. It's not going to help them focus by yelling, why aren't you focused? Or by yelling at them to stay focused. It's just going to make them mad, and it's actually going to make them even more distracted, because then they'll be focused on how mad they are that you're yelling at them about being focused.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, like, set kind of like set timers and stuff like that for the kids, or just like, if you notice them dozing off, just give them like a friendly reminder, be like, hey, let's stay focused, or something like that. Because sometimes a friendly reminder, prompting of some sort, can help. Oftentimes it can really help, as long as it's like a friendly reminder, as long as it's not like you kind of yelling at them.
Okay. Rosemary, did you have anything else that you wanted to? Yes.
No, I'm just I'm in that learning mode. And now I'm thinking, I wonder if one of my sons kind of had some ADHD.
Probably.
So I'm going to talk to him about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, Nolan, coming in and talking to all of us. It really helped to open up my mind and bring some understanding. And now when I work with kids that have ADHD, how to make things fun and really interesting using like movement, involving movement in the learning. So yeah, I really appreciate all that you had to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah. One thing I did want to add is, at least for me and a lot of other people that I know of who have ADHD, when you're working on something and you're trying to stay focused on it, you can't be staring at it the whole time. You can't stay focused on it by staring at it the whole time, because you'll just lose focus so easily and start thinking about how much you hate working on it. Like, for me, if I'm thinking about something, I'm looking at everywhere except for that. Like, I'll be looking at the ceiling or looking at just somewhere else, because otherwise I can't focus, or I need to essentially look at something that's not that, so that my brain can focus on it, sort of.
And you're
Um,
you're
what?
talking about this because you have exams where if they're online exams, they can measure like whether your eyes are looking at the screen and stuff like that,
Yeah,
right?
luckily I haven't had to deal with honor lock yet, but Yeah, that's a big thing. And then also I've just had teachers and professors in the past who have seen me kind of like my eyes wander, and they're like, keep your eyes on your paper and stuff like that. And I can't focus, and I can't typically I believe with most people anyway, they have to they can recall information the best by looking up, and typically to the left. Um
I know I do.
yeah. So
I go,
when I'm looking up to try and remember information, especially on a test, and somebody tells me, "Oh, look at your paper," then I'm like, I can't recall the information if I'm like this the whole time staring at my paper.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with having a conversation. Like you do your best thinking when you're walking around a room. Right?
Yeah. Anybody who knows me even slightly well would know that I can't focus unless I'm walking, or like I can't, if I'm having a conversation, if I'm not moving my body in some way, whether it's spinning in a chair or walking around, then I can't stay focused, and I'll end up backtracking and repeating myself 50 times because I'm trying to keep myself focused on what I'm talking about.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for giving us a picture into your just
brain.
share, yeah, into your brain, and just how you have, just kind of given us some understanding so that we can be more so that we can kind of adapt our teaching with kids that have ADHD brains. So
I found this session extremely helpful. Yeah, very much so. And it was extremely helpful. All the things that you said about what you do to, like in focusing, or if you're not interested, you can't focus on something. And I see in especially one of my students, when he is focused on science, like it's just, zeroed in like tunnel vision. When it comes to
That's oftentimes how it is.
yeah, when it comes to reading, like he can't focus in. So
Mhm.
thinking like, okay, how can I work with this, to make learning to read more interesting. So it's given me some ideas.
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess we didn't talk about it real quick. Your plans for the future are what? What are you?
Me?
What's your degree in? That
Computer science, and I'm at Columbia State Community College right now, and I'm planning on transferring to Tennessee Tech. But and then like going into what I'm thinking about is more of like the software developing, software engineering route of things. Just coding and programming is really, really fun for me. But yeah.
So, and now you have felt like this is off topic, but I think it's relevant to parents who are going through and have high schoolers. Have you found it to be helpful to go to community college first before going to a 4-year?
I think sort of. It's nice because it allowed me to figure things out with less of a consequence, because here in Tennessee at community colleges are like essentially free if you can keep above a 2.0 GPA. So it has allowed me to kind of figure things out a little bit better, and not feel like I have as much of a consequence, because I'm not feeling like I'm wasting thousands of dollars trying to figure my stuff out. Because I'll say this isn't just an ADHD thing or just a me thing. Anybody that I have talked to that is in college Like all of my friends at college and stuff like that, it's a huge like leap from high school. Like as far as everything is so much, you have almost too much freedom in college, because high school, it is same schedule every single day. It is always like 7 hours a day. And then after that, you go home and work on homework, or you go to work or whatever else. Versus with college, it's a different schedule every day and stuff like that. But so it can be really difficult to adapt, especially for, I mean, I think people with ADHD are able to typically adapt a little bit easier than other people, or than like neurotypical people. But even still, it can be really difficult to kind of adapt to, especially you're used to the hardest part to adapt to with college is the lack of structure. High school, everything is super structured. It is, you go to this class, then you go to that class, then you go to that class, and you have no choice what you're doing. And you have no time to do anything in between classes oftentimes, or at least for me, because I would always end up staying in the classroom at the end of class to finish an assignment or something like that, or to talk to a teacher or something like that. Versus with college, it's nice because the least amount of time that I've had in between classes is 10 minutes, which is double the amount of time that I had in high school. And and most of my classes aren't even that, like most of my classes I can have like an hour in between classes. So like for my history class, I can stay after class and talk to my professor about whatever I want to talk, like whatever we were focusing on or talking about that day during class. And so it can be really helpful for that. But there's a total lack of structure. Like when you get into college, most professors don't tell you, hey, you need to do, you know, like for my biggest thing with my biology class, my first semester last year, was that she told us at the beginning of the semester, and that was it, when assignments were due and stuff like that. Like when homework assignments were due, they were due like every, I think, Thursday and Saturday night. And I just forgot to do them most of the time, because in high school, I was always in a specific schedule. It was always, you go home, everything that was assigned that day was likely due the next day. Versus in college, most of the time, it is very rarely that you have something assigned that is due the next day. Most of the time it's due 3 days in advance, or 3 days from now, or whatever else, or weeks from now, or whatever. And so it can be really difficult because I tend to forget about that stuff. And um it's no longer that thing where I'm like, I know for a fact that I have this due, or that I have something due in this class every single day. It's now I'm having to look at my calendar and be like, or look at my phone or my watch or whatever else and be like, oh, do I have something due tonight or not? And and that I can forget that really easily, because of the fact that the other thing too is we don't get the reminder, or I never got for that biology class. The other difficult thing was we never got the reminders about it. She was never during class like, hey, don't forget you have this assignment due this day. She didn't say anything except the beginning of the semester. And so I went a few weeks without doing any of the assignments, because I completely forgot I even had to do them. And then coming back to them and realizing, oh shoot, I have this assignment, or I missed all these assignments. And it's no longer where, for half of high school, typically they were pretty lenient on late work. College for me is not that way. I've only had a couple of professors that even allow late work at all. And when they do, they dock pretty heavily points from it. Versus with high school, most of my teachers in high school would take off like maybe 5 points
Yeah.
if it was something late. So I could still turn in something late and still get a 95 on it. Versus with college, if they allow late work at all, then typically the highest grade you can get is like a 70, maybe an 80, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it's like a 70 or a 50 or a 60 or something like that.
Yeah.
But
You have to go, don't you? Because you have a class,
Yeah.
speaking of which, that's
yeah, I
starting.
have to leave in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so we should let you go. But so thank you, Nolan. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think this is going to be super helpful for parents who have younger kids and older kids. And just to help understand too how to best help their kiddos too. So thank you so much. I'll let you go so that you can get to your class.
Okay.
So, and I was just going to add to everybody else before we close this off. I know that we didn't go into specific strategies for college students, but you can see, if you can see all the things that have gotten in his way and the differences, then you can kind of reverse engineer it to kind of plan for how to set your kiddos up for success in advance. That's what I'm doing too with my youngest. You know, you learn through each kiddo. Unfortunately, the first one is the major guinea pig, and then the second one is a little bit more. And by the third one, then you're like, okay, I figured out a lot of stuff. So
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for him.
yeah. So
But at the same time, he still seems to get away with a lot more stuff than we do.
all right. Well, thank you, everyone. We will talk to you later. And so yeah, sounds good. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Okay, bye.